So what's going on?
Well, it's Wednesday, so
It is Wednesday.
we got that going on for us. Well, I guess we're recording this on a Wednesday.
Yeah,
You're probably hearing it on a who knows what day. Friday, if you
maybe.
listen to it the day it comes out, right?
No, I changed them to Wednesdays.
Oh,
So the
there
episode
you
drops
go.
on
It is a
Wednesday.
Wednesday.
So
So there you
so if
go.
people are listening to this as it drops, yep, it's a Wednesday for them as well.
All right. Well, awesome. How are things?
Things are good.
Yeah.
Things are good. Um, this would have been my wife's back to school week, but it is not since she's
So
staying home this year.
awesome. How is she liking it?
Good. I mean, it's a bit of an
It's
adjustment. It
early,
kind of
but
yeah. It caught up with us. Like I knew summer was flying by this year, but I didn't realize how fast
yeah.
until Sunday night. She said, "Well, I would have been getting ready to." Oh, actually, hold on for just a second. All right, I'm back. I forgot to hardwire in just to
Oh yeah.
prevent any kind of like skipping or whatnot.
Right.
So she turned to me. She goes, I would have been getting ready to go back to school tomorrow, but I'm not. And I mean, because we're incredibly fortunate that she's able to stay at home and we're able to have some fun adventures.
Yeah.
Really take
That'd
advantage
be
of my
awesome.
flexibility.
Yeah. That'll be awesome.
Yeah, like we're Labor Day weekend, which is coming up. We like everybody here races down to the Jersey Shore, Thursday night or Friday afternoon as soon as they get out of work. We're gonna go down Sunday night and then we'll come home Wednesday night because
Nice.
everyone will be racing to come home, shortly after lunch on Monday.
Yeah.
So, and like I remember it was 2 years ago. It was Monday of Labor Day weekend, and we're getting ready to go home. It was maybe about 2:30, 3 o'clock in the afternoon as we're driving. So we're leaving the shore house to come home. Yeah, we see this couple with two young kids making their way to the beach, and I'm like, I want that to be us.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go. Yeah, I'm a fan of the off peak time
Mm-hmm.
travel. That's my thing.
Yeah, because most kids in this area go back to school next week.
Okay.
And so one of the things we're doing is I'm taking off next Wednesday, and we're going to this neat little theme park on the way to Atlantic City. It's really meant for little kids. So we're going to take the kiddo there,
Yeah.
on Wednesday, because right after Labor Day, they just go to being open on weekends only. So I'm
Mhm.
like, well, let's go down on Wednesday. It won't be super crowded, and that should be fun.
Very fun. The joys of having a flexible work setup.
Yeah, no, it's awesome.
Yeah. And it's a good reminder because we even though we have the autonomy and flexibility, we often get stuck in our ways and don't fully take advantage of it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a good reminder that we need to take advantage of that time.
I mean, and actually, you're giving me my perfect segue for today.
Awesome.
It took me a couple years being here to really get rid of like that tether to the desk.
Yeah.
It took me a good couple years to really get comfortable with that level of flexibility. Like, yeah, I'm going to cut out on a Wednesday afternoon. Everything's in good shape,
Yeah.
right? Everything is where it needs to be. I'm going to go cut out, and we're going to go somewhere fun.
Yeah, it's an adjustment because we've grown up with that mindset of trying to fill a certain expectation, and it's hard to break out of that. It really is.
Mm-hmm. It is like so like I've gone down the camping rabbit hole. I think I've started telling you about this. So a little while ago, I started kind of getting this idea in the back of my head, like getting a small camper because it's just the three of us, getting a small
Hmm.
camper and start taking road trips. And then it was when I saw my brother-in-law, so my wife's brother, who's big into camping. We saw him back in July, and he was like, you guys with the truck, because I was talking about getting a little bit bigger of a truck. He's like, oh, with that, just get a small camper, and you guys can just head out and do stuff like on the weekends or long weekends, stuff like that. I'm like, this is the universe smacking me in the face. That this is something you really should do. So I've gone down the rabbit hole of that whole thing, and we're driving home from Connecticut. That's where my brother-in-law and sister-in-law live, this past weekend, because we went up for his 40th birthday. And I turned to my wife. I said, "What if when JP is 10 or 12 years old, we homeschool him for a year and just go on road trip after road trip after road trip? Take him to see all of this stuff, and that's part of it. Is part of his learning that year is going and seeing all of these things. I mean, wouldn't it be cool? Like, we go out for 3 weeks and we head out to to Colorado, Utah, New Mexico, see all of the various sites out there, and then we come back, and then we maybe go down to Texas, and then come back and whatnot." She goes, "That actually sounds like a lot of fun."
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, good. I'm kind of staking a flag of like 8 years out. That's where we want to be.
That sounds amazing. And I want to say, isn't there a book or something about uh, father and son? He took his son out of school his senior year of high school, and they just did an epic road trip. And you are 100% frozen. Oh, you're back
Yeah,
now.
yeah, I'm back now. You were about to say, isn't?
I said, it makes me think that maybe there's a book or something. I want to say I heard a story about a father and a son who they took the son out of school his senior year, and for his senior year they did this giant epic road trip together and kind of talked about what they learned. I'm gonna have to go. I'm gonna have to Google it now.
Yeah, yeah. Let me. I want to read that then. It's just I granted, like with other things going on right now, there's first things first that need to be taken care of, but it's like kind of starting to set that intention of what I would love to see us start doing in 2 to 3 years.
Yeah, yeah, that sounds awesome.
So yeah, let me know when you find that book. I'd love to check it
Yeah,
out.
I'll have to go. I'm probably not going to find it now, but I swear that I heard of something. Anyway, I'll find it and I'll share it with you when I
Mm-hmm. So
come across it.
so can you believe it? This is our 175th episode.
Oh, really? That's
Yes,
crazy.
it is, right?
Yeah,
It's nuts.
that's awesome.
Nice little milestone
It
to
is.
hit there. But to dig into our topic and how flexibility is going to play a segue here. So the last several episodes, we've been talking about online privacy and that being such a hot topic, and our perspectives on it. I want to pivot to a new series of
Okay.
episodes today, and this is a topic we've covered several times before in individual episodes, or the ideas come up in our talk, but I want to kind of pull together a string of episodes to really tie a lot of those conversations together without being completely and utterly redundant.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about remote work. I mean, it's core to how we do business. It's it's something that we crave, and like I said, like um working remotely, like it's a different mindset in so many different ways, including what we were talking about. Like, it took me a couple years just to kind of get out of the office mindset and get into, well, I can make this as flexible as I need it to be. As
Yeah.
long as stuff gets done, no one seems to yell. No, everybody's happy as long as stuff gets done. Doesn't matter when I do it, how I do it, and where I do it. Because, by the way, as a side note, um, like this September, one of the things I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go down and work from the boardwalk at the shore for a couple of hours. And I'm going to take my iPad. There's a coffee shop on the boardwalk. I've already
You're
got it
just
set.
just gonna go down there just to work?
I'm going to go down there for a couple hours, work there, and just
That's
just to say
awesome.
I did it.
Yeah.
I'll pick a Friday. I'll go there, hang out there on the boardwalk. I'll send you a picture of me working from the boardwalk. I'll work from there for a couple of hours, just for
Just to
just to
do
say I
it.
did it.
Yeah.
Um,
Those are the things that we should be doing more of, honestly.
yeah. Um, so right now, the debate, or you can even call it an argument, um, around remote work is about if and when, and if even people want to go back to the office. There are companies that are mandating employees come back. There's talk of a lot of people being in the position of saying, well, then I'm out. I don't want to go back to the office. So where I want to focus on today, well, actually, before I do that, part of the introduction that I skipped over is, when I tell people about what I do, um, I get one of two reactions. It's either I could never do that, or it's the it must be so nice to not have to get out of your pajamas. I wish I could do that. In that way, inferring this is something super easy to do. While we were just joking about how flexible it is and how fun it can be, it's not necessarily easy because the flexibility and the fun and the goodwill goes away when shit doesn't get done. So just a side note there. So I want to kick off with a stupid slash rhetorical question. Um, is remote work for everybody?
No. Yeah, I mean, so I've changed my stance on this over the years. Um, I in the beginning said, yes, it is, and I was very hard-headed. You're not going to convince me otherwise. That from a knowledge worker standpoint, remote work is absolutely for everyone and the way to go. I've definitely softened my stance on that a bit over the years, and um, come to the conclusion that it's not. I think from a business standpoint, maybe that's a different conversation. But from a personal standpoint, I think my lens says yes. Why wouldn't anybody want to do this? But there's a pretty good segment of people that it doesn't align with them. And I think this for me started to change on a road trip to Vegas with myself and Ben Gaines. We took a road trip to Vegas, and he's very much I need to be in the office person. And the first half of that road trip was like me trying to convince him. I'm like, no, you don't. Like, it's about remote. You need to be remote. And by the time we rolled into Vegas, I'm like, okay, I don't think you need to be remote. I think if the office is for you, it's for you. So it was really important for me to be open and hear his side of the story and how he thinks and operates. And it really started to shift my focus as far as being so um, one side or the other on this debate, and that there's a lot of gray area, and that there's a lot of areas where people are on one extreme or another, and I believe that's okay. What I think is important is for people to, I guess, a couple things. One, evaluate what they need to be happy and successful. And then two, remote work does give you by default a lot of things that you don't get by default in the office. And so if you're coming to the conclusion that remote work isn't for me, that I really need to be in the office, I would just say for those people, just make sure you're not giving up the some of the real critical pieces of remote work, and that is around autonomy and flexibility of your schedule. So, I think if for you, your well-being and the way you operate, you need to be in an office, I think that's a perfectly fine conclusion to come to, but don't do it at the expense of giving up autonomy and flexibility.
Um, so what do you think goes into that? It being for someone. Is it, just personality? Is it, um, yeah, what do you think makes, people it either be for somebody or not? Like what characteristics do you think are involved there?
I think it's a lot of things. I think personality traits is one of them. For someone, I think we've had some of these conversations before, talking about the major differences between introverts and extroverts, and there huge gradations within those categories as well. But people that are either true extroverts or have kind of that social aspect of being an introvert, they get their energy being around lots of other people and interactions with other people. For introverts, it's quite the opposite. We get our energy from very small, intimate conversations, alone time, thinking time to ourselves. And so, for someone that has those social needs, I think remote work can be very, very challenging. And not that it can't be fulfilled, but it's more on you. And it's important to accept that, right? Because if I go into the office, that social structure is pre-built in for me. I don't even have to think about it. I'm in the office, I go to meetings, we sit in conference rooms, I go to the cafeteria, a group is going out to lunch, so we go out to lunch. That social structure is built in for me. If I'm a remote worker, now the emphasis is on me to own that. It doesn't just happen organically. I have to force that to happen. I have to force kind of social outings and going out and having lunch with colleagues and maybe going to a co-working location to do some work. And that's hard for people because the default is I'm going to stay in my pajamas and roll into the office and just do some work. For someone that needs that strong social interaction, it can be a very lonely and depressing place to be for sure. And so um, it's not to say it won't work, but again, the emphasis is more on you, and it's something that you need to be honest with yourself about and say, is that something that I'm capable of doing? Is that something that I have the energy to create, or am I just going to fall into working, kind of by myself remotely, and is that going to be a problem for me? I'm not sure if that answers your question. I ended up going on a tangent, but I think that is part of it. The other part of it is just the structure of work itself, and people being honest with themselves. And I've had conversations with lots of people that are really missing and craving the office, and it's not so much about the office itself, but it's the structure of the work that they're missing, and they're just being honest with themselves, saying like, I am not a good remote worker. I don't, it doesn't come naturally to me to sit down in the morning and say, all right, I'm going to design my day. I'm going to figure out when and where I'm going to work. It just doesn't come natural to me. And so I struggle with it. I need to go back in the office where there's an expectation that, I'm going to roll in there somewhere between 8 and 10, and I'm going to roll out of there somewhere between 4 and 6. And there's a lunch period that's somewhere around noon. And, there's meetings structured for me. They just feel much more comfortable having that structure to their day. And I think it's very mature and wise for them to be able to admit to themselves that I just don't like, or I struggle with being able to create that structure for myself. So I think the common theme here is that for remote work, whether it's quote for you or not, the real common theme here is that people that are either attracted to it or successful in it, or those that are turned off by it or not so successful to it in it, really comes down to that component of, do I have the skills, desire, capability to provide the work structure myself, or am I better fit going somewhere where that structure is provided for me?
Mhm. No, I think that was great because I really liked when you got into the concepts of, you know, extroverts versus introverts, those two personality types. Because I know, and I've always known I'm an introvert. Um, and I have always hated going into the office. Um, and I think as part of that too, as I'm thinking through this, because the personality types, really lend to which one could work better for you. Um, the other component which you started to touch on there, but from the aspect of like the social hierarchy and whatnot, it being set for you or not, it's the idea of like, are you a self-starter or not? Because for someone, it seems like what I've noticed over the last 4 to 5 years is those that thrive best with remote work. And it's not saying that you can't. Again, we got to caveat all of this, just because what our perspective on it doesn't mean, if you don't have these certain traits, you can't. But I've seen those that have thrived the most are the ones that are self-starters. Um, they don't need, the group meetups in person every day to organize themselves. They're quite organized, by themselves, and they know how to organize their day. So I'm starting to ramble, but I think
No,
that's also
and
something to add to it.
for sure, and I agree, and I also want to be careful in saying that it's it it's important that we don't put labels on it either as good or bad or right or wrong. It's just a different way of working.
It's what
Uh,
works best for you.
that's right. So if creating your own structure and you having the internal desire to create that motivation to quote self-start and structure your day as something that aligns with you, then remote work is a I'm talking way too much with my hands here.
It's the
Um,
Italian.
yeah, it is. Um, now I lost my train of thought. Then remote work is really an ideal setup for you. If if on the other hand you're not, and you're where you perform the best is in environments where that structure is provided for you and you don't even have to think about it. eh, Again, it's important that we don't label that as good or bad or right or wrong, because both people can be insanely valuable, creative, can do really important things. It's just which environment is best for me to be able to do those things. And over the years, hold on, I got sidetracked by a text message. See, this happens in real time.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so over the years, again, I've changed my stance, and I've changed the way I viewed it, and I think that that's okay. It's I hope hopefully it's healthy to be able to get more knowledge and experience and be able to change your beliefs and what you think about things. Because on this topic, I absolutely have over the years really changed the way I think about it, and early on, I wouldn't have come to the conclusion that it's okay to be one way or the other. I would have been very firm again. It's like you have to remote work is where it's at. If you're not doing remote work, you're an idiot and you're not doing it right. I've very much come off that stance, and I'm much more coming from a perspective now that it should be a very big opportunity for people to choose that, but it's not something everyone should choose because it isn't for everyone. It should be a choice for those that have done the work to understand themselves and understand that that is where that they can be the most valuable. And on the flip side, it's also true that it's really important that we have more physical locations and structure provided for people that have done the thinking and gone through the thought process to say, this is what I need to be the most successful. And both of those are correct outcomes. What the most important thing is that we have the ability, and I don't know how you structure this from a business standpoint to give multiple options. And maybe it's okay that you don't. Maybe it's just this is how we work A versus B, or maybe we have a hybrid model and allow people to select companies that best align with their needs to say this is what I need in order to be the most productive. I think is a very healthy place to get to. And back to my original thought before I lost my train of thought was it's what now disturbs me and bothers me the most about the remote work discussion, especially on social media, is as tends to happen with hot topics like this, you develop a very outspoken cohort of thought leaders and people looking to take advantage of these new spaces. And so if you look on LinkedIn, if you look on Twitter, the people that have the most followers, getting the most interaction around remote work are these very far to the one side of remote work, saying that it's all remote work or nothing. You're a moron if you don't. Companies that, don't do full remote work are idiots. I just have a problem with it because it's not that black and white. It just isn't, nor should it be. We should have options for people again to choose work environments where they have a setup that is going to allow them to be the most successful. And I think it's absolutely ludicrous to think that that is remote, full remote for everybody. And again, this is a huge change of thought for me. If you would have asked me that question 5 years ago, I would have said absolutely, 100%. Everyone should be remote. I just don't think that anymore.
Mhm. And I mean that's healthy to be able to change a perspective like that, because kind of going back to where we started with this, the two types of reactions I get, the first one being someone says, well, I could never do that. And my response is that, well, one, I first ask, like, have you tried it? And some
Right.
people know, but I just know I can't. I'm like, well, I would say, if you have the option, give it a try. But those that said, oh yeah, I've tried it and I just can't. I just don't have the discipline to start. Because we had an episode quite a while back of like what makes someone successful in remote work. And one of our perspectives is the idea of routine,
Mm-hmm.
having that morning routine that tells you work starts. And so yeah, like people said, I've tried and I can't, like, there's a barrier there. And the office helps me break up my day
Mm-hmm.
the way I need it to.
For sure. And again, I think it's important to really seek those answers out for yourself and figure out what model fits best for you. And we're kind of talking in extremes as well as full
Mhm.
remote versus not. And again, it's not that simple. There are lots of options that are developing out there. You have companies that are full remote, like ours, and will for the foreseeable future be full remote. You have companies that have been very firm that it's full in office, and if you don't like that, go find a job somewhere else. So you have those extremes. But you have a lot starting to form in the middle, where whether you call it, I don't know, what are they calling it? Flexibility, part time,
It's a
hybrid
hybrid.
model. So you have different setups within that hybrid space where it's maybe, hey, there's an expectation that it's 3 days in the office, 2 days at home. We'll give you the option of what those days are. There's some companies where it's, well, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, absolutely have to be in the office. Thursday and Friday, you can work from home. Others that are going a little bit more towards the remote work side where they're saying, look, there's no expectation at all that you come in the office, but it's here for you as a resource. So you can use it if you want to come work in the office. You can use it as a collaboration space. So that's really where I think the discussion is going to lie, is that kind of intermediary gradient space. You're always going to have these few outliers on the ends that are full office, full remote. But I think the more interesting discussion where employees are really going to have to think about is that gradient in between, because that honestly is where most employers I'm seeing are falling. It's not on one of the extremes. It's somewhere in that middle of a hybrid model. As an employee and as an employer and a manager, it's important to figure out what that looks like. And again, ask the very healthy questions. Is this the right setup for me in order for me to be happy and most successful in my job? And as we're seeing this landscape shift, especially as COVID has really caused and forced this to happen more quickly than it was going to anyway, it's okay to say, I thought one thing 2 years ago, but now I think something else, and my current employer doesn't align with that anymore. It's okay to admit that, and it's not a condemnation that your employer's bad or you're failing in your current position. It's that, no, things have changed and I've reevaluated things, and now it's a really great opportunity for me to say, this model is not ideal. I now know the model that is right for me. I'm going to start to go look for companies that fit that model. And it's such a major mindset change from an employment standpoint. I think as you get older in your career, you start thinking about it. But we're seeing now more employees across the board, regardless if they're in their 20s or their 40s, they're thinking more about the environment and setup of the company that they're going to work for rather than the job, the role, or the title. Which oftentimes, especially early in our career, we don't even think about it. It's like, yeah, I'm just going to go get a job and they're going to pay me. But now, and then, again, we've kind of learned this through the pandemic, is that the environment that we work in is really what is the most important thing, above any of those other pieces. And we're really putting a lot of emphasis on making sure that we're working for companies that align with the environment that works best for us. And it's a win-win, obviously. Honestly, it should be obvious that it's a win-win if companies are open with their model and employees are selective in choosing the companies that best fit them. Both parties win. You have happier employees that are going to produce more value, which means the company is going to be more successful, which means they're going to generate more revenue. So I'm hoping this is something that everyone is open to being transparent about.
Mhm. And you have this habit of kind of preemptively answering the questions I'm about to ask.
Well, I
Um,
mean, it's our 175th episode. We've kind of aligned here.
we've got this because where I was going to go next was asking another hypothetical question, or not hypothetical, rhetorical question. I mean, of like because you were talking about those two extremes. What are your thoughts for folks that are being pushed to one of those two extremes, and it no longer works for them? Because obviously the easy answer is go look elsewhere, but
Yeah.
what else? Is there anything else to do
Well,
other than that?
yeah, and hopefully you work with a company that is not going to be so rigid. And again, if we look at social media and the news, they're going to highlight the companies. And I can't remember, was it Barclays, or there was a couple of companies that were kind of front and center in the news that took a very strong stance of get your ass back in the office or go find another job. I
Hmm.
don't think that's indicative of most companies. I'm hopeful that most companies have empathetic management teams that say, look, we're trying to figure this out as well. This is kind of what we're leaning towards, and are at least open to the conversation of me as an employee coming to them and saying, we've all learned a lot over the last couple of years. Here's what I'm understanding is the environment that I'm going to be able to create the most value for you. Is this something that we can work together to support something, or are you firmly set on it being this, which doesn't align with how I'm going to work best? I, hopefully you work for a management team where that's a healthy conversation to have, other than trying to just have that conversation in isolation and then come to a conclusion and say, well, it doesn't align, so therefore I need to go find a new job.
Hmm. Um, because my wife and I know, a couple of people that when everything went remote, some people moved. We know a few people that moved, and since they were doing their jobs 100% remote, um, and it was kind of set as indefinitely. They moved like 2 hours away from the city. They
Hmm.
moved out to a more rural kind of area, and when they were starting to talk about coming back into the office, they were like, we're not, we're staying where we're at. I'll try to get in once a week. Maybe we can cut a deal like that. I'll come in once a week, because it's now 2.5 hour drive.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's gonna happen. I thought it was gonna happen sooner, but as we've had kind of different waves and peaks in the pandemic, it's been a little bit slower than had anticipated. So we're probably still a little premature for that being a forcing behavior at this point. We're probably, I don't know, spring or summer of next year where this is really going to start to play out, where
Mhm.
business is going to go somewhat, quote, back to normal. And employers and employees are going to have to come to a reckoning of, am I willing to give up what I've had the last couple of years in order to maintain my employment? And that's going to be a difficult conversation to have, because the reality is that for some companies they may not be open to it. And they may say, we wanted to provide this flexibility, or maybe our hand was forced to provide this flexibility because of the pandemic. However, now that we're kind of back to some kind of business as usual, we're going to go back to the way things were before. I think that they're in their right to do that. That's a perfectly fine conclusion to come to. What they're going to have to also accept, though, is that they're going to probably lose a big portion of their employee base, and they'll just have to have a plan for how to replace those employees with, again, employees that, as we've talked about, better align with their structure, which they're out there. They're just going to have to be open and transparent that this is our model and this is the type of employee that we're going to look for, because the reality is there is going to be a large number of employees where they're going to hear from their employer, we'd love to support this, but you being 2 hours away is just not feasible. And they're going to hear from a lot of those employees that are going to say, I understand, I've enjoyed the opportunity to be here, it's time for us to go our separate ways.
For those that, see, here's the thing is, it's like, for those that want to try it but can't, but honestly, at this point, who hasn't had a chance to
Yeah, I
try
mean,
working remote over the last year and a half? It's
but to be fair, to be fair to them, it's maybe not reflective of what it may look like in the future,
Mhm.
if that's a fair statement, because um, it's a slightly different scenario than I think the future is going to be, because there wasn't a lot of thought for companies that didn't have experience working remote before. They didn't have a lot of time to think about it. They just kind of threw something together and say, go work remote. That may not be indicative of what the experience looks like going forward once they have an opportunity to, as companies do, put process and policies and things in place. So yes, we've had an opportunity. Pretty much everyone in a knowledge worker role has had an opportunity to experience remote work, but it may not be indicative of what remote work may look like on, again, both of the extremes. So if you're at a company where your whole history was in the office, you rolled in on a Monday and they said office is closed indefinitely, go work from home. That work from home experience you're having right now is vastly different than what it would look like if you had worked for a company that was started and built as a remote first company. And it's going to look vastly different from a company that has had the time to think about the policies and procedures they're going to put in place to be a company that has a strong hand and directive on how you work remotely. So yes, we've all had the chance to work remote. No, it may not be indicative of what an actual remote work setup will look like outside of a pandemic.
Mhm. So, what would be your biggest piece of advice for companies, with your history of working remote, being a proponent of it, um, running a remote first company, for those companies that are embracing it, go forward now. It was initially
Yeah.
just something temporary to get through the pandemic, but they've seen benefits, employees are happier and whatnot. What would be the biggest piece of advice you would give companies as they're starting to set up those processes and procedures? Because the reason why I'm asking that question is whenever we start to see processes and procedures come in, like, it's not always a good thing. And
Yeah.
granted, none is also not a good thing. Um, but like, for those companies who are like, okay, we need this for the long haul, I could see some of them trying to replicate the office remotely, which that's
Yeah.
not going to have a great experience. They're not going to have a great experience there.
Yeah, so I would say two things. One, to your point, don't try to replicate the office remotely. It's something completely different. And if your vision is try to replicate an office experience remotely, it's going to be a failure. I've seen lots of examples of this over the last couple of years. That's not to say um, we shouldn't be empathetic with things that happen in the office that we need to find analogs for. Absolutely, but don't try to just recreate a in the office, a remotely. It just doesn't work. But more importantly than that, my biggest piece of advice is just be clear and transparent on what it is, what flavor you're choosing. Again, I don't think there's a one size fit all approach for how businesses address remote work and flexibility into the future. There's going to be a huge gradient of flavors that businesses can choose from. I would just say be clear and transparent on the one that you're choosing. I I think that is going to drive the biggest value for companies, because what will happen if you're not transparent in that, which companies in the past haven't always been, and most of them aren't in their hiring practices. Just think
Hmm.
about companies that you've interviewed with. They're anything but truthful and transparent in their hiring. They want to put on this kind of best face window dressing so that you come in and buy, and then wait a minute, this isn't what you sold me. This is something completely different, because they don't want to give you all, well, actually, it's a challenge here. We have baggage. We have things. They're not going to ever say that. But the weird thing is, I think if they do, you end up attracting employees where it's like, okay, this is a fit for me. And the same is true for this flavor, whatever flavor of remote that you pick. Just be open about it and be clear, so that you can attract employees that have put the thought into it to say, yeah, your flavor that you've picked, that is right for me. I want to come work for you. Don't pick a remote policy and say we're a remote friendly company and we love remote, and then you get all these people on board and then come to find out that it's basically the office sitting at home, because I now have a 24-hour video feed on me so that I can be micromanaged and they're watching what I'm doing and they're logging my keystrokes. And that's not going to fly with people if you tell them that you're a remote friendly company. Just so, if that's what you need to do, fine, but be transparent about it and say, this is how we're going to manage it going forward.
Hmm. Yeah. So as we start to wrap up here, um, for those that the past year and a half has been an introduction to remote work, and it's something that they're like, you know what, I think this is something that works for me.
Mm-hmm.
What would be the one thing you would tell them, make sure you try? Not as a preemptive, like to make sure it's for you, but make sure you try and do this so the employee is also not replicating just the office at home.
Oh man, that is a really, really good question. I don't know. I don't know if I have an answer to that. And I'm going to fall back on being open and honest with yourself about the setup that you need to really be successful. I don't want to say that we've reduced expectations over the last year and a half, 2 years, but again, we have to be realistic that this is not a normal time, and things are absolutely functioning differently. And so while we may feel good and successful working remote right now, it's important to accept that this is probably not the reality going forward, that that's going to change, and there's probably going to be different level of expectation. So I would just say, for those employees, especially those that this has been their first exposure to remote work, is to really evaluate it and be honest with yourself and ask that question that we started off the episode asking, you know, do I need to be in an environment where the structure is provided for me, or do I have the desire and skills to be a self-starter to design my day? Because again, you may be doing parts of that right now, but it's just not normal. It's we've kind of had the expectation, it's different. Everyone's working from home, so we're going to kind of cut everybody some slack. Once we go back to some kind of sense of normal, there's going to be some higher expectations on you as a remote worker. Are you comfortable owning that, or is your comfort level going to be more back in the office?
Hmm. Yes, very, very well said. My thoughts around that are, go out and experiment with some fun stuff. Think of things like that you have maybe always wanted to do, because it's almost like, it feels like in some ways this is like the 90-day free trial of
Yeah,
work from home. But
yeah.
try it before you buy it. Um, because I think back for me specifically, like for more than 10 years now, I've had the ability to work from home. So the one company I worked for, it was a bit of a hybrid.
Hmm.
I'd work from home 2 days a week and go in the office 3 days. And sometimes, like, during the winter when it would snow pretty badly, I'd be home for a week or so. And that worked. And then worked for a company where I was remote but doing a lot of traveling, and then here. But still, it wasn't up until, God, maybe a year and a half to 2 years ago, when it was like, I've got more flexibility than I've been taking advantage of. There's no one staring over me, staring over my shoulder to make sure I'm in a desk. Why not try to branch out and try to find some fun places to go work, and try that, and really try to embrace it. And granted, like, you can't do that all the time. There are days where it's just like, I need to come into my office. lock the door behind me, and sit down and crank out work. There are definitely those days. But then it's seeking out the opportunities when maybe I don't have things that have to be delivered so soon. I can go out and or I don't have deadlines quickly approaching. I
Hmm.
can go try to find somewhere to do work, whether it's something as simple as the front patio and sitting outside, or going to a park or something like that.
Yeah, I think that's good advice. Again, kind of trying to experience the totality of remote work and just getting outside of the necessity of, well, we don't have any other option right now.
Mhm.
I think that's great advice.
Cool. Well, this is fun. It was fun to catch up on
Yeah.
this topic again. It's always something where we have something to talk about. And yeah, it's the last year and a half. It's like people have been thrown into this, whether they wanted to or not. And
Yep.
at least from what I'm seeing is there's a lot of people that are like, I really like this. I can get my job done. I don't need to go into an office, and I can live where I want to live, kind of have, some of the thing, like a lifestyle that I want without having to say be in close proximity to an office downtown.
It's true. It's been incredibly eye opening for a lot of people, and I think that's a good thing. It's
Mhm.
unfortunate that this is the event that had to cause that, but this having a different option for work was invisible to so many people for so long. And as a positive coming out of this, the fact that employees again now see that they have a choice of options, I think is a very good
Mhm.
thing.
Yeah. So to wrap up, one of the things I was thinking of as we were talking through this is the rabbit hole I'd mentioned that I had gone down, to kind of start off our conversation. I was watching several videos by this couple that spent weeks at a time working on the road. They had their
Hmm.
truck. They have grown children. But they had their truck, they had their dogs, they had their trailer, and would just go out and be working remotely for weeks on end. And I'm
Yeah.
like, that
Looks
right
so
now,
awesome.
that is so appealing.
Yeah.
Hit the road, go see national parks, get some work done. So appealing at the moment.
And if you do want to see that, there are a lot of great YouTube
Hmm.
creators that are doing this, that,
Hmm.
are remote work, they're developers, they're designers, they're whatever, that they just go and drop down in a national park or somewhere and they just work. And it's an amazing opportunity. And that's kind of maybe an extreme. And I know we're trying to wrap up here, but that's maybe an extreme. But there's so many opportunities within there to just, and that would be the biggest takeaway. I think the hardest part of remote work is taking advantage of those opportunities. And you starting out saying, "Hey, I'm just going to go down and work at the shore for a few hours." Like, we really need to take advantage of that because there's so many, we have that control and flexibility. The reality is we rarely take advantage of it, and we really
Yeah.
need to be.
Yeah. And my rule of thumb is as long as stuff gets done, nobody's going to care where you did it, when you did it, asterisks, as long as it's, like I said, within a timely fashion. But like, no one's going to care where you did it.
No.
If you did it at 1 a.m., 1 p.m., whatever, as long as stuff gets done, people don't care.
And the reality is when people are happy and are doing what they love, they tend to create really great work.
Yeah.
So,
Cool, man.
all right.
Well, this has been good.
Yep.
All righty. Catch you later.
See you.